There is a prayer that millions of people whisper every single day. Some say it in church. Some say it alone in the quiet of their room. Some say it in moments of desperation when life feels confusing and directionless. It usually sounds something like this. God, bless my life. God, use me. God, give me purpose. God, make my life meaningful. At first glance, it seems like one of the most beautiful prayers a person can make. After all, what could possibly be wrong with asking for a blessed life? But what if I told you that hidden inside that prayer is one of the most dangerous requests you can ever make? Not dangerous because it harms you, but dangerous because of what it will require from you. Most people imagine blessings as something simple. They imagine doors opening. They imagine opportunities appearing. They imagine life suddenly becoming easier. They picture success, peace, clarity, a smooth path where everything finally starts working out. But that picture is rarely how real blessings arrive. In fact, the kind of blessing that truly changes your life often begins in the exact opposite way. It begins with disruption. Sometimes it begins with confusion. Sometimes it begins with things in your life slowly falling apart. And that's the part no one talks about. Because the truth is this: the blessing most people pray for often starts by dismantling the life they currently have. It may begin with plans collapsing, relationships shifting, dreams that once felt certain suddenly losing their meaning. A strange feeling that something inside you is changing, even though you can't explain it yet. At first, it feels unsettling. You start asking questions. Why does everything suddenly feel different? Why do the things that once excited me now feel empty? Why does my life feel so uncertain when all I asked for was guidance? What many people don't realize in those moments is that transformation rarely feels comfortable at the beginning. Because real blessing is not just about adding things to your life. Often, it begins by removing illusions. The illusion that comfort equals fulfillment. The illusion that success always looks the way we imagined. The illusion that the person we are today is the person we are meant to remain. When you ask for purpose, you are not simply asking for direction. You are asking for change. When you ask for a blessed life, you are not simply asking for good things to happen. You are asking to become someone capable of carrying something greater. And becoming that person almost always requires a process that stretches your patience, challenges your identity, and forces you to grow in ways you never expected. This is why so many people start praying for a blessing, but panic when the process begins. They think something has gone wrong. They think their life is falling apart. They think their prayers were ignored. But sometimes the exact opposite is happening. Sometimes the process that feels like loss is actually preparation. Sometimes the confusion you feel is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that your old path is no longer meant for you. Because the truth is this: the blessings that truly transform your life are rarely comfortable. They are powerful. They are demanding. And they require a version of you that does not yet fully exist. Which means before the blessing arrives, something inside you must change. Something inside you must grow. Something inside you must let go of the person you used to be. And that is why the blessing most people pray for can also be the most dangerous one. Because when that prayer is finally answered, your life may never look the same again. Part 1. The blessing people think they want. 1600 plus words. When people pray for blessings, most of them imagine a very specific kind of outcome. They picture success. They picture stability. They picture a life where their struggles slowly disappear and things finally start going their way. In their minds, blessing means life becoming easier, more opportunities, more clarity, more comfort. But very few people stop to ask a deeper question. What exactly does a real blessing require? Because in many cases, the blessing people ask for is not just a gift. It is an invitation into growth, an invitation into responsibility, and most importantly, an invitation into transformation. Imagine someone who prays for purpose. They wake up every day feeling like their life lacks direction. They feel like they were meant for something more. So they pray, God, show me my purpose. At first, this seems like a simple request. But purpose is not something that simply appears like a gift wrapped in certainty. Purpose demands alignment. And alignment often requires change. Sometimes that change begins internally. You start questioning things you once accepted without thinking. You begin noticing that certain environments no longer feel right. Conversations that once felt normal now feel draining. The things that once motivated you suddenly feel shallow. At first, you may not even understand what is happening. All you know is that something inside you has shifted, and that shift can feel deeply uncomfortable, because the life you once built may no longer match the person you are becoming. But the truth is this: purpose rarely fits into the life you had before discovering it. It reshapes your priorities. It rearranges your time. It changes the way you think about success. And sometimes it even changes the people around you. This is why the blessing of purpose can feel disruptive, because it begins by revealing what no longer belongs in your life. The same thing happens when people pray for growth. Growth sounds inspiring. Everyone likes the idea of becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable. But real growth almost never happens in comfort. It happens through challenge. It happens through situations that stretch your patience. Situations that force you to confront your fears. Situations that expose the parts of yourself that still need maturity. If someone asks for courage, they may find themselves facing fear. If someone asks for patience, they may encounter situations that test their temper. If someone asks for wisdom, they may walk through experiences that challenge their understanding. Because growth is not learned in theory. It is learned through experience. And experience often arrives disguised as difficulty. This is why the blessing people imagine in their prayers often looks very different when it finally arrives. What they pictured as ease becomes effort. What they expected to be comfortable becomes demanding. And what they thought would feel like instant clarity may begin with uncertainty. But none of this means the blessing is absent. In fact, it may mean the blessing has already begun. Because real blessing is not simply about receiving something new. It is about becoming someone new. And becoming someone new requires letting go of the person you used to be. That is the part most people are not prepared for. They want the reward, but they underestimate the transformation required to carry it. They want the impact, but they underestimate the discipline required to sustain it. They want the purpose, but they underestimate the identity shift required to live it. And so when the process begins, many people interpret it the wrong way. They see discomfort and assume something is wrong. They see change and assume they made a mistake. They see uncertainty and assume their prayers were ignored. But sometimes those very moments are the first signs that their life is moving towards something greater. Because the blessing they prayed for has already begun its work. And that work is not simply changing their circumstances. It is changing them, the person they are becoming, the way they think, the courage they are developing, the clarity that is slowly emerging through experience. And once that process truly begins, life rarely goes back to the way it was before. Because when transformation starts, comfort is no longer the goal. Becoming who you are meant to be is. When people pray for blessings, they usually picture something very simple. They imagine life finally becoming easier. They imagine opportunities opening like doors that were once locked. They imagine waking up one day and feeling like everything is finally working in their favor. For many people, the idea of a blessed life looks like success, stability, happiness, and clarity all arriving at the same time. Bills are easier to pay. Relationships are peaceful. Dreams start moving forward. Life feels lighter. And on the surface, there is nothing wrong with hoping for those things. But what many people misunderstand is that blessings are not just about receiving better circumstances. True blessings often require becoming a different person than the one you are today. And becoming that person is rarely comfortable. Think about the kinds of prayers people often make. God, help me succeed. God, give me influence so I can help others. God, show me my purpose. These prayers sound noble and inspiring, but each of them carries an invisible consequence. Success requires discipline. Influence requires responsibility. Purpose requires transformation. And transformation always begins by confronting the parts of our lives that are not aligned with where we are meant to go. That means the blessing you asked for might begin by revealing what needs to change. Maybe the habits you have developed are not strong enough to support the future you are asking for. Maybe the environment around you is shaping you in ways that limit your potential. Maybe the mindset you have carried for years is quietly holding you back. When that realization begins to appear, it can feel unsettling. Because suddenly the comfortable life you were used to no longer feels the same. You start noticing things that once felt normal, but now feel heavy. You begin questioning patterns that you never questioned before. You feel a quiet tension between the life you currently live and the life you sense you are meant to live. That tension is often the first sign that something is shifting inside you. But most people misunderstand that feeling. Instead of seeing it as growth, they see it as a problem. They assume something has gone wrong. They wonder why life suddenly feels more complicated when all they asked for was guidance. But in reality, the blessing may already be unfolding. Because true blessing does not always add comfort first. Sometimes it adds awareness. And awareness changes everything. Once you become aware that your current life is not fully aligned with who you are meant to be, it becomes impossible to ignore that truth. You may try to go back to the way things were before. You may try to silence the inner voice that is telling you something must change. But the more you grow, the harder it becomes to pretend that everything is fine. This is why many people begin their journey toward purpose with confusion rather than clarity. They expected answers. Instead, they received questions. They expected certainty. Instead, they received awareness. And awareness forces them to see their lives more honestly. The job they once accepted without thinking may now feel empty. The routines they once followed automatically may now feel meaningless. Even certain relationships may begin to feel misaligned with the person they are becoming. This does not mean those things were always wrong. It simply means that growth has begun to change their perspective. And when perspective changes, life begins to look different. At this stage, many people feel tempted to retreat. They want the blessing, but they do not want the discomfort that comes with transformation. They want purpose, but they do not want to release the identity they have built around their current life. But the truth is that purpose cannot fully enter a life that refuses to evolve. Growth demands movement. It demands the courage to question what has always been familiar. It demands the humility to admit that who you were yesterday may not be who you need to be tomorrow. This is why the blessing people imagine in their prayers rarely arrives in the way they expect. They imagine a gift, but what they receive is an invitation to grow, an invitation to mature, an invitation to become stronger than they were before. And invitations always require a response. You can accept the invitation and begin the process of transformation, or you can reject it and hold tightly to the life you already know. Neither choice is easy, because transformation requires letting go of comfort. But refusing transformation often means remaining stuck. This is the crossroads where many people find themselves without even realizing it. They asked for a blessing. Now life is quietly asking them a question in return. Are you ready to become the person who can carry it? Because the blessings that truly change your life are rarely just about receiving something new. They are about becoming someone new. And that process begins the moment your old life starts feeling too small for who you are becoming. It begins when the dreams that once satisfied you no longer feel big enough. It begins when the path you once followed without hesitation suddenly feels uncertain. Those moments can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. But they are often the early signs that your life is expanding beyond the limits you once accepted. The blessing has not disappeared. It has simply begun its work inside you. And once that work begins, something remarkable starts to happen. Your definition of blessing slowly changes. You begin to understand that blessing is not just about what you receive. It is about who you become in the process of receiving it. A person who learns discipline becomes capable of greater responsibility. A person who learns humility becomes capable of deeper leadership. A person who learns resilience becomes capable of facing challenges that once seemed impossible. In this way, blessing is not simply an event. It is a transformation. It reshapes your character. It strengthens your perspective. It prepares you for a future that once seemed far beyond your reach. But none of that happens instantly. It happens step by step, often in ways that are invisible at first. And that is why the blessing people pray for can feel so confusing when it finally begins. Because the process that creates greatness rarely feels comfortable in the beginning. It feels uncertain. It feels demanding. And sometimes, it even feels like life is pushing you out of the version of yourself that you once believed would last forever. But that discomfort is often the sign that something greater is taking shape. Not just around you, but within you. One of the most confusing parts of the spiritual journey is this simple reality. The moment a real blessing begins to enter your life, things often start to feel unstable. At first, that sounds completely backwards. After all, shouldn't blessings make life smoother? Shouldn't they bring peace, clarity, and direction? But if you look closely at the way transformation actually happens in life, you begin to notice a pattern. Before something new can be built, something old usually has to shift. Before a stronger version of your life can exist, the structure you were living inside may need to expand. And expansion rarely feels comfortable at first. Imagine someone who has lived their entire life inside a small room. Inside that room, everything feels familiar. They know exactly where the walls are. They know where every object sits. They know how to move without bumping into anything. It may not be the most exciting room, but it is predictable, safe. Now imagine that suddenly the walls of that room begin to move. The space begins expanding. At first, that sounds like a good thing. More space means more possibilities. But to the person inside the room, it may feel confusing. The walls they once relied on for orientation are no longer in the same place. The boundaries they understood have shifted. Everything feels unfamiliar. The very thing that is giving them more room to grow is also removing the structure they once depended on. This is often exactly what happens when a real blessing begins reshaping a person's life. The structures that once defined their world begin to change. The routines they followed without thinking begin to feel restrictive. The identity they built around certain habits or environments begins to feel incomplete. And suddenly, life feels less predictable than it did before. For many people, that moment feels frightening. Because uncertainty can easily be mistaken for failure. They begin to wonder if they made a wrong decision. They question whether they misunderstood their path. They wonder why things feel harder when they thought blessings were supposed to make life easier. But disruption is not always a sign that something is going wrong. Sometimes disruption is the sign that something new is trying to emerge. Think about how growth happens in nature. When a seed begins to grow, the very first thing it does is break apart. The outer shell that once protected it begins to crack. From the outside, it may look like destruction. But in reality, that breaking is the beginning of life. The seed must break open in order for the plant to grow. The same pattern often appears in human growth. Before a new level of purpose can emerge, old patterns may need to be challenged. Before a stronger sense of direction appears, previous assumptions may need to be questioned. Before a greater calling becomes clear, the life you built around your old identity may begin to feel unstable. That instability is not always comfortable, but it can be incredibly important. Because disruption creates awareness. It forces you to see things you once ignored. It forces you to notice areas of your life that no longer align with who you are becoming. And once you see those things clearly, you can no longer pretend they do not exist. That awareness becomes the first step toward transformation. However, this is also the stage where many people become discouraged. They expected blessings to feel like relief. Instead, they feel pressure. They expected clarity. Instead, they experience questions. They expected stability. Instead, they feel like the ground beneath their feet has shifted. And in those moments, many people assume that their prayers were not answered. But sometimes the answer to their prayer has already arrived. It simply did not arrive in the form they expected. Because blessings do not always appear as gifts. Sometimes they appear as opportunities to grow. Opportunities that require courage. Opportunities that demand honesty. Opportunities that challenge the comfortable version of life you once believed was enough. And those opportunities often begin with disruption. For example, someone who prays for purpose may suddenly begin feeling restless in the career they once accepted. The work that once felt fine now feels empty. The goals that once motivated them now feel shallow. At first, that restlessness feels frustrating. They wonder why satisfaction has disappeared. But that feeling may actually be the beginning of clarity. Because purpose often begins by showing you what no longer fulfills you. Similarly, someone who prays for stronger character may encounter situations that test their patience. They may find themselves dealing with people who challenge their emotions. They may face obstacles that force them to develop resilience. Those situations may feel unpleasant, but they are often the exact experiences that develop the strength they once prayed for. Growth rarely happens in environments that never challenge us. It happens in environments that stretch us beyond our current limits. And stretching always involves a certain level of discomfort. This is why the blessings that reshape a life often begin with disruption. They disrupt the routines that kept you stagnant. They disrupt the assumptions that limited your thinking. They disrupt the comfort that quietly prevented your growth. Without disruption, many people would remain in the same patterns for their entire lives. They would never question whether they were capable of more. They would never explore the deeper purpose that might exist beyond their current routines. They would simply continue living inside the boundaries they have always known. But blessings have a strange way of expanding those boundaries. They reveal possibilities that were once invisible. They awaken desires that once felt distant. They challenge you to imagine a life that is bigger than the one you have been living. And that challenge can feel unsettling at first, because growth requires leaving something familiar behind. But here is the truth that many people only realize later. What feels like your life falling apart may actually be your life rearranging. The disruption you experience may not be destroying your path. It may be clearing space for a better one. The uncertainty you feel may not be a sign that you are lost. It may be a sign that your old direction is no longer meant to define your future. And once you begin to see disruption in that way, something powerful happens. Fear slowly transforms into curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this preparing me for?" Instead of assuming that difficulty means failure, you begin to consider the possibility that difficulty might be part of the process. Because the blessings that truly change your life are rarely small adjustments. They are expansions. They stretch your vision. They reshape your priorities. They transform the way you see yourself and the world around you. And expansion always begins with movement. Movement that pushes against the limits of the life you once believed would remain the same. For some people, that movement feels exciting. For others, it feels terrifying. But for anyone who is truly seeking purpose, that movement is unavoidable. Because the path toward a greater life rarely begins with comfort. It begins with disruption. And that disruption may be the very thing leading you toward the blessing you once prayed for. When disruption enters your life, something deeper begins to happen. Not just around you, but inside you. Because once the old stability of your life starts shifting, your mind and heart are forced into a battle that many people are never prepared for. It is not a battle against the world. It is a battle within yourself. And this internal war is often the most difficult part of the journey toward the blessing you once prayed for. From the outside, your life may still look normal. You may still go to work. You may still talk with the same people. You may still follow the same routines. But inside you, something is changing. There is a quiet tension growing between who you have been and who you are becoming. And that tension can feel overwhelming. Because part of you wants to stay where things are safe and familiar. But another part of you senses that something greater is waiting beyond the life you currently know. This inner conflict is one of the clearest signs that transformation has begun. But for many people, it feels like confusion rather than progress. They begin asking themselves difficult questions. Why do I suddenly feel dissatisfied with things that once made me comfortable? Why do I feel pulled toward change even though change scares me? Why does my old life no longer feel like enough? The reason is simple. Growth creates tension. When a person begins evolving beyond their previous mindset, their old patterns can no longer fully contain them. It is like trying to wear clothes that no longer fit. At one time, those clothes felt perfect. Now they feel restrictive. You begin to feel the same tension in your life. The habits that once defined your routine begin to feel limiting. The goals that once motivated you begin to feel shallow. Even the identity you once built around yourself may begin to feel incomplete. And that is when the internal war begins. The first battle that most people experience is the battle between comfort and calling. Comfort always speaks in a calm and familiar voice. It reminds you of what you already know. It tells you that staying where you are is safer than risking the unknown. It says things like, "You already have a stable life. Why complicate things? What if change makes everything worse?" Comfort tries to protect you by keeping you inside the boundaries of your current life. And sometimes that protection feels convincing. But calling speaks differently. Calling does not always shout. Often it whispers. It appears as a quiet sense that you were meant for something more. It appears as a persistent curiosity about paths you have not yet explored. It appears as a deep desire to grow beyond the version of yourself that currently exists. And even though calling may feel less certain than comfort, it carries a strange kind of energy. An energy that refuses to disappear. You may try to ignore it. You may try to silence it by focusing on routine. But the more you grow, the harder it becomes to pretend that voice is not there. This is the moment where many people feel torn between two worlds. The world they understand, and the world they sense might exist beyond their current limits. The second battle that appears during this stage is the battle between fear and faith. Fear is powerful because it speaks in very practical language. It reminds you of every risk involved in change. What if you fail? What if you lose what you already have? What if people judge you? What if the path you follow leads nowhere? Fear focuses on everything that could go wrong. And in many ways, it is trying to protect you. It wants to keep you safe from disappointment, safe from embarrassment, safe from uncertainty. But faith offers a different perspective. Faith does not guarantee that every step will be easy. Instead, it encourages you to believe that growth is possible even when the path ahead is unclear. Faith suggests that your life may hold possibilities that your current understanding cannot yet see. It reminds you that many of the most meaningful journeys begin without perfect certainty. Faith does not eliminate fear, but it allows you to move forward despite fear. And that ability is what slowly transforms a person's life. The third battle that often appears in this internal war is the battle between your old identity and your emerging identity. Every person develops a story about who they are. That story is shaped by past experiences. It is shaped by successes and failures. It is shaped by the expectations of family, friends, and society. Over time, that story becomes your identity. You begin to believe that the person you have always been is the person you must remain. But growth challenges that belief. Because when transformation begins, it often reveals abilities, desires, and perspectives that did not exist before. You start realizing that you may be capable of more than you once believed. You begin imagining a version of yourself that is stronger, wiser, and more courageous. But embracing that new identity requires releasing parts of the old one. And that process can feel uncomfortable. The habits you once relied on may no longer serve you. The excuses you once accepted may no longer feel valid. The limitations you once believed about yourself may start to dissolve. Letting go of those things can feel like losing something familiar. But in reality, you are not losing yourself. You are expanding yourself. You are allowing a larger version of your identity to emerge. Still, the transition between the old identity and the new one is rarely smooth. There is often a period where you feel caught between two versions of yourself. Not fully the person you used to be, but not yet the person you are becoming. This in-between stage can feel confusing. It can feel lonely. And sometimes it can even feel discouraging. Because progress is not always visible during this phase. You may not yet see the results of your growth. You may not yet feel the clarity you were hoping for. All you feel is the tension between the life you knew and the life that may be forming ahead. And this is the exact stage where many people give up. They retreat back into comfort. They silence the voice of calling. They convince themselves that the safe path is better than the uncertain one. But those who continue forward eventually realize something important. The internal war they experienced was not a sign that they were lost. It was a sign that they were changing. It was the process of their character expanding beyond its previous limits. Because before a person can carry the blessing they prayed for, they must become someone capable of holding it. And that transformation always begins within. Not in the world around them, but in the quiet battles that reshape the way they think, believe, and act. Those battles may feel exhausting at times, but they are also the birthplace of courage, the birthplace of clarity, and the birthplace of the stronger version of yourself that your future requires. The internal war may feel uncomfortable, but it is often the very process that prepares you for the life you once asked for. By the time a person reaches this stage of the journey, something important has already begun to change inside them. They have felt the disruption. They have experienced the internal war between comfort and calling. They have started questioning the life they once believed was enough. But there is another truth that slowly begins to reveal itself during this process. Every blessing carries a cost. This is not a cost in the sense of punishment. It is the cost of responsibility, the cost of growth. The cost of becoming the kind of person who can sustain the very thing they once prayed for. Many people imagine blessings as something that simply adds joy to life. But blessings that change your life often add weight as well. Because the bigger the opportunity, the greater the responsibility attached to it. Imagine someone who dreams of leadership. They pray for influence. They want to inspire people, guide others, and make a meaningful impact. But leadership is not just about being heard. It is about carrying the expectations of others. It is about making difficult decisions when there is no perfect answer. It is about staying strong when people depend on your stability. Leadership is not simply a reward. It is a responsibility that demands maturity. The same is true for nearly every blessing people ask for. Someone who prays for success may not realize that success requires discipline that continues long after the excitement of achievement fades. Someone who prays for purpose may not realize that purpose often demands sacrifices that comfort never required. Someone who prays for influence may not realize that influence brings criticism as well as admiration. The blessing itself may be beautiful, but the weight that comes with it is real. And that weight is what many people are not prepared for when they first begin their journey. At the beginning, the focus is usually on what they hope to gain. More meaning, more opportunity, more fulfillment. But rarely do people stop to consider what they may need to release in order to carry that future. Because the truth is that growth often requires letting go. Letting go of habits that once felt harmless, but now hold you back. Letting go of relationships that cannot grow with the person you are becoming. Letting go of beliefs that once protected your comfort, but now limit your potential. These changes can feel painful, not because they are wrong, but because they require leaving behind parts of life that once felt familiar. Sometimes the cost appears in the form of time. The path toward purpose may require hours of learning, effort, and persistence that others may never see. Sometimes the cost appears in the form of patience. Opportunities may take longer to develop than expected. Progress may unfold slower than your excitement hoped for. Sometimes the cost appears in the form of misunderstanding. The people around you may not always understand the direction your life is taking. They may question your choices. They may even doubt your vision. And during those moments, it becomes tempting to return to the life that felt easier. But the deeper you move into the journey, the clearer something becomes. The cost of growth is not greater than the cost of staying the same. Because remaining in a life that no longer fits who you are becoming carries its own burden. A burden of unfulfilled potential. A burden of quiet regret. A burden of knowing that somewhere inside you, a greater life was possible but never explored. And for many people, that burden eventually becomes heavier than the challenges of transformation. This is when perspective begins to shift. Instead of seeing the cost of growth as a loss, you begin to see it as an investment. Every difficult lesson becomes a form of preparation. Every challenge becomes a form of training. Every moment of patience becomes a strengthening of character. You begin to understand that the blessing you prayed for is not simply something that appears suddenly in your life. It is something your life must gradually grow strong enough to carry. Think about the difference between receiving something small and receiving something great. Small things require little preparation, but great things require capacity. A person who receives responsibility without the maturity to handle it will struggle. A person who receives influence without the wisdom to guide it may misuse it. A person who receives opportunity without discipline may lose it as quickly as it arrived. This is why the process of preparation often feels long. Because the blessing itself may be large. And large blessings require large character. That character is not developed overnight. It is shaped through experience, through failure, through perseverance, through moments where you must choose growth even when comfort calls you back. At first, this process can feel unfair. You may wonder why the path toward the life you desire feels so demanding. But over time, something powerful begins to happen. You start noticing the ways you have changed. The patience you once lacked begins to appear. The courage you once struggled to find begins to grow. The discipline that once felt difficult becomes part of your routine. Without realizing it, the person you are becoming slowly evolves into someone capable of carrying greater things. And when that transformation reaches a certain point, the blessing you once prayed for begins to make sense. Not just because it arrives, but because you are finally ready for it. You are no longer the same person who made that prayer long ago. You are stronger, wiser, more resilient, more aware of the responsibility that comes with the life you are building. And this is when you begin to see the deeper wisdom behind the process. The blessing was never just about what you would receive. It was about who you would become along the way. Because the most powerful blessings do not simply change your circumstances. They change your character. They reshape your identity. They transform the way you see challenges, opportunities, and even yourself. And once that transformation takes place, something incredible becomes possible. You are no longer just someone hoping for a better life. You are someone capable of building one. The cost of the blessing may have felt heavy at times. but the person it created inside you is stronger than the comfort you once tried to protect. And that strength is what prepares you for what comes next. By the time someone reaches this stage of the journey, they have already experienced something most people try to avoid. They have felt disruption. They have faced the internal war between comfort and calling. They have begun paying the hidden cost of growth. But there is another test that often appears before the blessing truly reveals itself. And this test is quieter than the others. It does not always appear as a dramatic challenge. It often appears in the ordinary moments of life. This is the test of the heart. Because before someone can be trusted with greater things, something deeper than skill must be examined. Their intentions, their character, their motives. It is possible for a person to desire a blessing for the wrong reasons. Some people want success because they want recognition. Some people want influence because they want admiration. Some people want purpose because they believe it will finally make them feel important. But true purpose is not built on ego, and blessings that shape the world cannot rest on unstable motives. This is why the journey often includes moments that quietly reveal what truly lives inside your heart. Situations appear that test your patience. Moments arise that challenge your humility. Opportunities come that tempt your integrity. And in each of those moments, something important is being revealed, not to the world, but to you. Because the path toward meaningful responsibility requires honesty with yourself. You must begin to see your own motives clearly. You must understand the difference between wanting something for personal validation and wanting something for genuine purpose. That realization can be uncomfortable because it forces you to confront parts of yourself that you may have ignored for years. Maybe you discover that some of your ambitions were fueled more by comparison than calling. Maybe you realize that certain goals were shaped more by external pressure than by your own values. Maybe you notice that approval from others influenced your choices more than you once believed. These realizations can feel humbling, but humility is not weakness. It is clarity, and clarity allows transformation to go deeper. Because once you see your motives honestly, you gain the power to refine them. Instead of chasing success for recognition, you begin pursuing excellence for impact. Instead of seeking influence for admiration, you begin seeking influence for responsibility. Instead of searching for purpose as a way to prove your worth, you begin understanding that your worth was never dependent on achievement in the first place. That shift changes everything. Because when the heart begins to align with purpose rather than ego, the entire journey becomes different. The desire for growth becomes more sincere. The willingness to endure challenges becomes stronger. The commitment to integrity becomes more natural. And this transformation of the heart is often one of the most important preparations for the blessing ahead. But the test does not stop there. Another way the heart is tested is through patience. Many people pray for purpose and expect it to appear quickly. They imagine that once they begin seeking direction, answers will come immediately. But in reality, growth often unfolds slowly. Opportunities may take time to develop. Understanding may arrive gradually rather than suddenly. And during those waiting seasons, the heart is quietly tested again. Do you remain faithful to the path even when recognition is absent? Do you continue growing even when progress feels invisible? Do you remain committed to your values even when shortcuts appear tempting? These questions reveal whether a person is truly prepared for the responsibility they desire. Because anyone can feel motivated when success is visible. But character is revealed in seasons where progress feels uncertain. The waiting seasons are often where the deepest transformation occurs. They teach patience. They strengthen discipline. They reveal whether your motivation is temporary excitement or genuine commitment. And those lessons shape the kind of person you become. Another way the heart is tested appears in how you treat others during your journey. When people begin pursuing purpose, it can be easy to become focused entirely on personal growth. But purpose that forgets compassion quickly loses its meaning. The way you treat people when you have little influence often predicts the way you will treat people when you have greater influence. Kindness in small moments matters. Integrity in quiet decisions matters. Respect toward others matters. Because character is not built in public achievements. It is built in private choices. The choices you make when no one is watching. The choices you make when there is nothing immediate to gain. And those small decisions slowly shape the foundation of who you are becoming. If that foundation is strong, the blessing that eventually arrives will have stability. If that foundation is weak, even great opportunities can collapse under the weight of poor character. This is why the test of the heart is so important. It ensures that the blessing you receive will not only elevate your life, but also strengthen the lives of others around you. Because the greatest blessings are never meant to exist for one person alone. They ripple outward. They influence families, communities, generations. And that kind of influence requires more than talent. It requires integrity. It requires humility. It requires a heart that understands responsibility. At first, these lessons may feel subtle. You may not realize they are happening. But over time, something begins to change within you. You become less focused on proving yourself, more focused on improving yourself. You become less concerned with how quickly success arrives, more committed to becoming someone worthy of success when it does arrive. That transformation of the heart is what separates temporary ambition from lasting purpose. And once that transformation begins to take root, the journey enters a new phase. Because when your heart is aligned with growth rather than ego, something powerful becomes possible. You are no longer just chasing a blessing. You are becoming someone capable of carrying it. And that quiet transformation may be the most important step before the blessing you prayed for finally appears. After everything a person has gone through on this journey, there comes a stage that is far more dangerous than any challenge before it. It is not the beginning of the journey. It is not the moment of disruption. It is not even the internal war that happens early in transformation. It is the stage where progress exists, but the destination is still not visible. This is the moment where most people quietly turn back. Because by this point, you have already changed. You have begun letting go of old habits. You have started questioning old beliefs. You have invested time, energy, and emotional strength into becoming a different person. But the blessing you once prayed for still seems distant. You are no longer the person you used to be. Yet you have not fully stepped into the life you imagined either. You are standing in the middle. And the middle is uncomfortable. The middle is where certainty disappears. The middle is where motivation is tested. The middle is where patience becomes the hardest discipline to maintain. At the beginning of any journey, excitement creates energy. New goals feel inspiring. New possibilities feel exciting. But excitement does not last forever. Eventually, the emotional energy fades, and what remains is the quiet work of consistency. This is where many people begin to feel tired. They wonder if their efforts truly matter. They wonder if the path they chose will ever lead somewhere meaningful. They begin looking at others whose lives appear easier or more successful. And comparison begins whispering in their mind. Maybe you chose the wrong path. Maybe you are trying too hard. Maybe the life you hoped for is unrealistic. These thoughts can slowly weaken the determination that once felt strong. Because progress in the middle stage often feels invisible. You are growing, but the results are not always obvious. You are developing new discipline, but the reward has not yet arrived. You are becoming stronger, but the world around you may not recognize that strength yet. And this creates a powerful temptation. The temptation to return to the life you left behind. Because the old life still exists. The familiar routines are still there. The comfortable identity you once carried is still waiting. You could return to it. You could rebuild the old version of yourself. You could stop questioning, stop pushing, stop growing. And life would likely become easier again, at least on the surface. But something inside you would know the truth. You would know that you stepped away from the path that once called you forward. And that quiet awareness would remain with you. This is why the middle stage of transformation is so important. Because it reveals whether your commitment to growth is temporary or genuine. Anyone can pursue change when excitement is strong. Anyone can chase dreams when hope feels bright. But perseverance appears when the journey becomes long and uncertain. This is where character reveals itself. Do you continue moving forward when results are slow? Do you continue learning when progress feels invisible? Do you continue believing when doubt tries to convince you to stop? These questions define the moment most people turn back. And the reason many people retreat during this stage is simple. They misinterpret the silence of progress. They assume that because the blessing has not appeared yet, nothing is happening. But in reality, the most important transformation is still taking place. You are developing endurance. Endurance is one of the most powerful qualities a person can possess. Because life will always contain challenges. Purpose will always involve responsibility. And responsibility requires the strength to continue moving forward even when motivation fades. The middle stage of the journey is where endurance is built. You learn to rely less on emotion and more on discipline. You learn to keep growing even when no one is watching. You learn to stay committed to your path even when the results are delayed. These lessons may feel difficult in the moment, but they create something incredibly valuable inside you. They create stability. A person who has learned endurance cannot be easily shaken by temporary setbacks. They cannot be easily distracted by comparison. They cannot be easily discouraged by slow progress, because they understand something that many people never realize. Transformation takes time. The strongest trees do not grow overnight. The most resilient character is not built in a single season. The greatest purposes often require years of preparation. Once you begin to accept that truth, your perspective begins to change. Instead of asking, "Why is this taking so long?" you begin asking, "What is this time preparing inside me?" Instead of focusing on how far you still need to go, you begin recognizing how far you have already come. And slowly, your mindset shifts from impatience to endurance, from doubt to quiet confidence, from chasing results to trusting the process of growth itself. This is the turning point, because once a person reaches this level of understanding, something powerful happens. The journey no longer feels like a struggle. It begins to feel like preparation. You realize that the blessing you once prayed for was never just waiting somewhere in the future. It has been shaping you the entire time. Every challenge strengthened your resilience. Every waiting season refined your character. Every moment of doubt forced you to grow deeper roots of faith and discipline. Without those experiences, the blessing itself might have overwhelmed you. But now something has changed. You are no longer the same person who started this journey. You have become stronger than the uncertainty you once feared. And that strength is exactly what prepares you for the final stage of the transformation. Because the blessing that once seemed distant may be closer than you realize. But before it fully arrives, there is one final truth that must be understood. After everything you have gone through on this journey, something remarkable begins to happen. But it does not arrive the way most people expect. Many people imagine that when a blessing finally appears, it will come as a dramatic moment, a sudden breakthrough, a clear sign, a life-changing opportunity that instantly proves the long journey was worth it. And sometimes life does work that way. But more often, the moment when the blessing truly reveals itself is much quieter. It arrives not as an event, but as a realization. A realization that something inside you has changed so deeply that you are no longer the same person who once prayed for that blessing. Think back to the beginning of your journey. At the start, your understanding of the blessing was probably simple. You imagined the result. You imagined the opportunity. You imagined how your life might look once everything finally worked out. But the deeper you traveled into the process, the more you began to see something surprising. The blessing was never only about what you would receive. It was about who you would become. Because if the opportunity had appeared at the very beginning, before the disruption, before the internal war, before the long season of growth, you may not have been ready for it. In fact, it might have destroyed the very thing you were hoping it would build. This is the part of the journey that many people only understand after they reach it. Blessings can be dangerous when they arrive before character is strong enough to hold them. Success without discipline can lead to pride. Influence without humility can lead to misuse. Opportunity without wisdom can lead to collapse. History is filled with stories of people who received great opportunities before they were prepared to handle them. And instead of building a meaningful life, those opportunities became the very thing that caused their downfall. That is why the journey of preparation matters so much. Because the true blessing is not simply the opportunity itself. It is the person you become while preparing for it. Look at who you are now compared to who you were at the beginning. At the start, you may have been motivated mostly by excitement. Now you understand the value of endurance. At the start, you may have wanted quick results. Now you understand the importance of patience. At the start, you may have been focused on proving something to the world. Now you are more focused on becoming someone who can serve a purpose greater than personal recognition. These changes are not small. They are the transformation that makes the blessing sustainable. Without them, the opportunity might have overwhelmed you. But now something inside you is different. You have grown stronger roots. Your identity is no longer built on fragile confidence or temporary motivation. It is built on experience, on resilience, on the lessons you learned during the seasons when progress felt invisible. And that stability changes the way you approach the future. Because the blessing that once felt like a distant dream now becomes something else. It becomes a responsibility. You begin to understand that the opportunity you prayed for is not simply meant to make your life easier. It is meant to make your life meaningful. And meaningful lives carry weight. They require courage. They require integrity. They require the willingness to keep growing long after the excitement of success fades. But the remarkable thing is that by the time you reach this stage, those responsibilities no longer feel frightening. They feel natural. Because the person you have become is capable of carrying them. This is when the true purpose of the blessing becomes clear. It was never meant to simply elevate you. It was meant to shape you into someone who could elevate others as well. Think about the influence a transformed person can have on the world. Someone who has learned patience can guide others through their waiting seasons. Someone who has faced doubt can encourage others who feel uncertain. Someone who has developed resilience can inspire people who are ready to give up. Your journey becomes more than just your own story. It becomes a source of strength for people who are walking similar paths. And that is where the blessing reveals its deepest meaning. It multiplies. The lessons you learn begin to help others grow. The strength you develop begins to support others who are struggling. The wisdom you gained begins to guide people who are searching for direction. What once felt like a personal dream slowly becomes something larger. It becomes impact. This is why the blessing that many people pray for can be dangerous. Not because it harms them, but because it demands transformation. It refuses to leave a person unchanged. It stretches their vision. It reshapes their identity. It forces them to grow beyond the limits they once believed defined them. And not everyone is willing to walk through that process. Some people turn back during the disruption. Some people give up during the internal war. Some people lose patience during the long middle stage. But those who continue forward eventually discover something extraordinary. The blessing they once prayed for was preparing them long before it appeared. Every challenge had meaning. Every delay had purpose. Every season of growth was shaping the strength they would need later. And when that realization finally settles into your heart, something powerful happens. You stop seeing the journey as a struggle you had to survive. You begin seeing it as a process that built the person you were meant to become. The blessing did arrive, but it did not arrive in the way you once imagined. It arrived in the form of transformation, a stronger mind, a deeper faith, a clearer sense of purpose, a life that is no longer driven by fear of failure, but guided by the desire to grow and serve something meaningful. And once you understand that truth, the future begins to look different, because you are no longer waiting for life to change. You have already become someone capable of changing it. The blessing you once prayed for is no longer just ahead of you. It is already unfolding through the person you have become. And that realization may be the most powerful gift the entire journey was meant to give you. When people first begin their journey, they often believe that the greatest moment in life will be the moment their prayer is answered. The moment the opportunity finally appears. The moment everything begins to work out. The moment they can finally say, "This is what I was waiting for." But by the time you reach the end of this journey, something inside you begins to understand a deeper truth. The most important moment was never the blessing itself. It was the transformation that happened while you were waiting for it. Because when you first prayed for something greater, you probably imagined that your life would simply expand. More success, more opportunity, more clarity. But you may not have realized that in order for that life to exist, you would first need to become someone capable of living it. And that process changes everything. It changes the way you see struggle. It changes the way you see delays. It even changes the way you see the silence that once felt frustrating. Because what once looked like obstacles were actually stages of preparation. Every disruption that forced you out of comfort. Every internal battle that reshaped your mindset. Every waiting season that strengthened your patience. Every quiet test that refined your heart. They were all part of something larger. They were shaping the person who could eventually carry the blessing you once asked for. And when you finally understand that, the journey itself begins to look different. You realize that the greatest gift was never just the destination. It was the person you became along the way. Think about who you are now compared to who you once were. The person who started this journey may have been hopeful, but also uncertain, motivated, but not yet resilient, ambitious, but still learning what responsibility truly means. The version of you that exists now is different. You have faced moments that tested your patience. You have endured seasons where progress felt invisible. You have wrestled with doubt and still continued forward. You have learned that growth rarely happens in comfortable environments. And because of those experiences, something powerful now lives inside you. Strength. Not the loud kind that tries to impress others, but the quiet kind that knows it can endure difficulty and still move forward. That strength is the real foundation of every meaningful blessing. Because without it, opportunities can easily overwhelm a person. But with it, opportunities become something entirely different. They become tools. Tools to build a meaningful life. Tools to influence others in positive ways. Tools to create impact that extends beyond your own story. And this is where the journey reveals its final lesson. The blessing you prayed for was never only meant for you. It was meant to reach further. When a person grows through adversity, they develop something incredibly valuable. Perspective. They understand struggles that others may still be facing. They recognize the fears that can stop people from pursuing growth. They remember the waiting seasons that felt uncertain. And because of that understanding, they become capable of helping others navigate those same moments. Your story becomes more than just a personal victory. It becomes a light for people who are still walking through the darkness you once knew. It becomes encouragement for someone who feels like giving up. It becomes proof that transformation is possible. That purpose can emerge from confusion. That resilience can grow from struggle. And that blessings often arrive through the very challenges we once wished would disappear. This is the part of the journey where many people discover something surprising. The prayer they once made has changed. At the beginning, the prayer may have sounded something like this. Give me the opportunity I've been waiting for. Give me the success I've been hoping for. Give me the life I believe I'm meant to live. But after walking through the entire process of transformation, a new kind of prayer begins to form. A deeper prayer. A wiser prayer. Instead of asking only for the blessing, the heart begins to ask for something greater. Give me the strength to carry the life I've been given. Give me the wisdom to use my opportunities well. Give me the humility to remember why this journey began. Because once a person reaches this understanding, they realize something extraordinary. Life is not simply about receiving blessings. It is about becoming someone who can turn those blessings into something meaningful. Someone who can use them with integrity. Someone who can share their growth with others. Someone who understands that purpose is not about personal recognition, but about impact. And when that realization finally settles into your heart, the fear that once surrounded the future begins to disappear. You are no longer afraid of the challenges that may come, because you know something now that you did not know before. You have already been prepared. Prepared through struggle. Prepared through patience. Prepared through transformation. The person you have become is stronger than the uncertainty ahead. And that means the blessing you once prayed for is no longer something fragile. It is something you can carry. Something you can build with. Something you can use to create a life that matters. So if you ever find yourself in a season where things feel uncertain, where progress seems slow, where the blessing you once prayed for still feels distant, remember this. The process you are walking through may not be delaying your purpose. It may be preparing you for it. Because the most powerful blessings in life are not simply given. They are grown into. And the person you are becoming along this journey may be the greatest answer to your prayer that you will ever receive.